The live Tom Brady roast may have been just a glimpse at Netflix's future in that space. As Puck News is reporting, the streaming leader will carry 2 NFL games on Christmas Day. What it means for the streaming space and who's got the edge in NBA rights, let's bring in Research Director at CFRA Research, Ken Leon. Talk all things streaming. Always good to see you, Ken. Let's first talk about this Netflix, at this point, report, because they have not confirmed it. It was strictly a Puck News report at this point. How would that work? Because they would not be broadcasting the games like Amazon. They would be borrowing from a broadcast. And what's your reaction to the report? What's the impact?
Yeah, this is exciting. And actually, I got a glimpse of the Tom Brady event yesterday. They had 15,000 people there for Tom Brady. That's pretty amazing. And we fast forward to Christmas. To your question, and it's great to be with you. Certainly Netflix has learned from last year when Comcast with Peacock did it, but unexpectedly. So you would expect a lot of promotions of the Christmas Day football. It's expected to be announced perhaps this Wednesday. Having 2 games on Christmas is amazing. What it will cost, will filter out, but it won't come cheaply. And it's also going to give Netflix even more greater credibility with advertising sponsors because in the U.S., NFL football by far gets the highest spend from advertisers. So it's very exciting, and it's calibrated when you look at sports as part of Netflix entertainment of a thoughtful progression. They did announce over a $1 billion deal with the Worldwide Wrestling, and that's mostly for their reach outside of the U.S. And then we saw back earlier this year the one-time event in Las Vegas in tennis, which I love, with Rafael Nadal and Alcaraz. So they're getting more than a toe in the water would be the punchline here.
Indeed, and keep your eye on the Mike Tyson, Logan Paul, Jake Paul, fight. But back to your point about, you mentioned Comcast and Peacock doing games, but they actually broadcast them. That was their own team, their own production. From what I understand, Netflix is not getting into the broadcast side of it, but borrowing from a broadcast. Is that, they'd have to completely change their model in order to hire talent and broadcast an NFL game. That's not what's happening, is it?
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's a good point, and we'll have to see the details in terms of actually producing that kind of an event. And then again, Netflix spends about $17 billion a year on content and programming, and they're very thoughtful internally in terms of how they use that capital, but then also, given that they're not doing this every week on NFL football, they might be smart in terms of managing the cost side so they get attractive margins because they're going to pay dearly, obviously, for having those events.
Ken, that was my question. What is something like this going to cost Netflix?
Well, Worldwide Wrestling is $1 billion. That's multiple events. Fox gave up Thursday night NFL football every week to Amazon, which paid $1 billion. So the numbers, which are probably way too conservative, is 50. I'm thinking, north of 100 million to 250.
100 million to 250. That would seem low compared to what some of these other networks pay in terms of broadcast rights. As someone who follows the stock, I mean, do you think it makes sense from a business perspective for Netflix to do something like this now?
Well, it does. And by the way, those who are paying handsomely, in the billions for sporting's rights are multi-year, long-term contracts that can run, well above 5 to 7 years. So I think for Netflix, again, it's in the toe in the water. It's going to give tremendous brand recognition for Netflix, not with their 270 million subscribers, but for, in particular, U.S. Corporate advertisers.
Turning to another sport that really impacts the streaming space is the NBA rights deal, which could be announced any day, frankly, could drag out a little bit. And it appears the big battle is between Comcast and Peacock and then WBD. Who retains the rights? Because it sounds like Disney ESPN hangs on to a piece, and it sounds like Amazon gets a slice of the streaming. Who do you think wins out between Peacock, Comcast, and WBD? And how does it impact both of those companies?
Yeah, the NBA is exciting, and the NBA would be next up after NFL in terms of value for viewers and stickiness for subscribers for streaming. And then again, also for the broadcasts down to the TV station. So we had the earnings results from Warner Brothers Discovery last week. They do get to counteroffer any bid that's out there. And if you think about it, in terms of the bundles that are being created, one of which is the kind of trifecta of Fox, Disney, and Warner Brothers Discovery. If Warner Brothers Discovery doesn't have the NBA, it's a really a weak leg of those partnership. I think for Comcast with NBC Universal, it would be a nice win. But if they really want it, they're going to bid very high. You know, Warner Brothers Discovery's got about $48 billion of debt. If they still want it, if David Zaslav wants it, the CEO, they'll have to sell some assets to get something to keep NBA, because it's been really exciting in the playoffs this year.
I know advertising obviously is the business case for this, Ken, and as you mentioned, a way for Netflix to kind of dip its toes into this experience. But for Netflix subscribers, the consumer standpoint, I'm wondering what this might mean for them. How does this impact the content on Netflix that they had known, where the company would spend hundreds of millions of dollars producing a single season of The Crown, 10 episodes, versus that much money perhaps for just a game or two?
Yeah, I think it's in the right place. And, keep in mind, Netflix advertising revenue subscribers, which just started a year ago, is about 10% of their total subscriber base. And it's part of the equation. But then also what I like about, if they're going to move ahead for Christmas NFL football, is that the highest average revenue per subscriber is North America, followed by Europe. Disney made a big mistake where they put in too much management time and capital into India for cricket, Hotstar, and they lost out on those rights. But, the average revenue per subscriber, the premium in the US for Netflix is about $22. In India, it just went down to 75 cents a month. So you're never going to make money in India. So if you're going to put a bigger stake in the ground for media in North America, you want to play into NFL.
And finally, another really interesting story in streaming, and this was last week, was the bundle now between Warner Brothers Discovery and Disney, which is a really interesting play, because most of us said, wait, are we headed right back to cable, the very thing we are all trying to get away from? Will we see more deals like this, and what does it mean?
Yeah, so I think the financial media and some analysts are excited because it's a bundle that will have very compelling programming. And if we have a collection of 7 or 10 streamers, it accelerates. Maybe we end up with 5, including the technology giants. To me, as a research director or analyst, what it suggests is it's a position of weakness. The business model is broken in terms of having a thoughtful migration from broadcast to streaming. You cannot control your customer. The first 20 years of my career was covering wireless, and there you had, even today, 2-year contracts. So it's trying to arrest customer churn and the binge watchers. And then the narrative is, well, we're going to get somebody who doesn't watch sports on broadcast or even today. So there's 50 million of them out there, and we'll charge $50 a month on it. We'll see. We will see what that model is, what the margins are, and what eventually gets downstream to each of these 3 partners. So, I think each of these joint ventures is from a position of weakness, not from strength.
Interesting. Ken, we appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. Ken is the research director at CFRA Research.